Welcome to the spirit world, answering your questions on angels, demons, and how the spiritual and physical worlds interact. And now your hosts, Debbie Georgianni and Adam Bly.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the Spirit World. I am Debbie Georgianni, and I'm with religious demonologist and co-host Adam Bly, and we have a special treat for the Spirit World listeners and followers today. We have a guest. It's very rare, and when we do, we're not going to be taking your phone calls because you know how we like to open up the phone lines right away for all of our Spirit World listeners. But today, on this Independence Day weekend, on this whole weekend, we are really going to listen and learn, and we've got and I'm telling you, an extraordinary guest with us for the entire hour. So you're going to want to take notes. As a matter of fact, go run and get your notebooks because you definitely are going to learn something today. Adam, though, we always begin with the St. Michael prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. And Adam, we're just going to jump right in, and I'll let you properly introduce our wonderful guest. And we've lined up so many questions about his newest book, and we're excited about that. So we will definitely take away a new understanding about the college campuses and the atmosphere and what's going on and the history and the origin and all the transformations that have happened. So we're going to learn a lot today, Adam.
So we are really happy to have George Weigel with us. He has written many books. He has been involved in politics. He's a deep thinker. A lot of people have gone to him for insights and perspective on things. So let me give you a brief bio. George Weigel is a distinguished senior fellow of Washington's Ethics and Public Policy Center. He is the New York Times bestselling author of more than 24 books, including the 2 volumes of his internationally acclaimed biography of St. John Paul II, Witness to Hope, and The End and the Beginning. Other works by Weigel include The Fragility of Order, The Next Pope, Evangelical Catholicism, and Not Forgotten. So, George, thank you so much for being here. I know that when I've written books, I've not written nearly as many as you. I know it can be tiring and all the interviews that the publishers have us do, but we really appreciate you spending time with us. I have, some thoughts and questions about universities, but, I'd like to open up and just whatever you'd like to share with us as an opening about this book. What was your motivation or what do you feel strongly about?
I like the title. Let's begin with that. I think Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice, Commencement Addresses, and University Lectures, at least on the front end of the colon, is a fun title. So I rather enjoyed that, and I'm glad my friends at Ignatius Press agreed to it. But the book is in 2 parts. The first part is about a dozen commencement addresses I've given at universities, both here and in Europe. The second part is a set of lectures I've given in university contexts, again, well, not only here and in Europe, but in Latin America as well. If there's a connecting thread in all of this, it's an attempt to show how the crisis of modern or postmodern higher education, which has become unmistakably clear through the events of the last year and a half on various so-called elite college campuses, is in some very fundamental way related to the separation of faith and reason, which was a theme, of course, dear to the heart of John Paul II and Benedict XVI. John Paul II wrote an encyclical with precisely that title, Fides et Ratio, Faith and Reason. And in it, he said, I think beautifully, this may have been in the first paragraph, faith and reason are 2 wings, of the 2 wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of the truth. Now, contrast that with a quote from the former president of Harvard University, Dr. Drew Faust, in the preface to this book, in which I quote Dr. Faust at her inauguration about 20 years ago, saying, truth is not a possession, it's an aspiration, something we aim at. Well, that was certainly not the view of the founders of Harvard College 300 and some years ago. And that is a prescription for disaster. Because when there's only your truth and my truth, and nothing that either one of us recognizes as the truth, you get chaos. And because people can't live in chaos, you then get the imposition of order by usually the state. And this is what Joseph Ratzinger meant in April 2005 by the dictatorship of relativism. Before we get to that, though, we get the chaos, and that's what you have seen on these elite, so-called elite campuses over the past year and a half, where overprivileged, undereducated snowflakes are chanting anti-Semitic, genocidal slogans, which they have no comprehension of. This is just junk they've picked up on social media and online, and this makes a complete travesty of anything known as education. Why do faith and reason need to work together? Well, reason purifies faith from superstition. That was a theme that Ratzinger insisted on for well over the 60 years of his productive intellectual life. And faith challenges reason not to aim too low. In Faith and Reason, the encyclical, John Paul II said to philosophy, and this will be my interpretation of his words, stop thinking about thinking about thinking and start thinking about the big questions again. Why is there something rather than nothing? What is good and what is evil? What is our destiny? Are we more than congealed stardust? Which is actually the title of one of these commencement addresses here. So the book is an attempt to kind of lift up a vision of what higher education could look like and how Catholic higher education can provide a model of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, let me jump in for a moment, George, because I think what you're saying is so important. But let's go back to how there has always been this Catholic influence, and you say you talk about it in the book of Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice, how it's been a Catholic invention. Go back to the beginning, because there was such a heavy emphasis of Catholicism in our higher education, correct? In fact, our whole education system. And then what has really happened? Have the universities just rejected all of it, some of it, part of it? I mean, what has been your experience?
Well, let's go back about 900 years, maybe 1,000 years. The Catholic Church invented what we know today as the university. It invented it during the High Middle Ages in places like Bologna, Paris, Oxford, Cambridge, Krakow, Prague, Salamanca, where communities of scholars and students got together for robust intellectual inquiry, for really serious debate. And out of that experience came what we know as the university. What has happened today is a number of things. First of all, there's this notion that I mentioned a moment ago, that there is no such thing as the truth. That is merely something we aim at. That's an aspiration. Secondly, too many colleges and universities have simply become trade schools. You go to these places in order to get a job once you punch the tickets and get the degree. Third, the notion of formation has generally left much of higher education. Formation means shaping hearts and souls as well as educating minds. Now, the Catholic colleges and universities, at which I've been privileged to give commencement addresses, still take formation seriously, still take mode of life on campus seriously, are not sexual free fire zones like much of the university world is today. And that's why they provide a template for the genuine reform of higher education. But we've got big problems in the country because of the failure of our institutions of higher learning to actually produce learning. The dumbing down of curricula, for example, is a major problem. A couple of years ago, I have a friend who's a historian, teaches at a major state university in the Northeast, which I will not name on the principle, be merciful as your heavenly Father is merciful. He told me, I'm teaching a course on the history of baseball. I said, great, send me your syllabus. There may be some books on it that I'd like to read. He said, what did you say? I said, books. He said, George, if I assign more than one book and one essay in this course, no one would sign up for it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now, I'm sorry, that is not education. That is not education. And this is only going to become more difficult to address when artificial intelligence becomes more and more available. I think this AI site is called Perplexity. And a friend of mine pointed out to me the other day, and I asked it to write a summary of Witness to Hope. Witness to Hope is a 900-page book. This thing, in a minute, spat out a summary of the book that was as good as anything I could have written.
Wow.
Now, good luck professors trying to tell what the kid has written and what, came off the internet.
Wow.
So lots of challenges.
This is amazing. We're going to learn a lot, and we are with our wonderful guest, George Weigel, on his newest book, Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice. And we've got more questions for George Weigel when we come back from this very short break. Guys, I know you're so used to calling in and asking questions, and maybe we could ask Mr. Weigel to come back at a later date and take questions from the Spirit World listeners, but not today, you guys. This is a pre-recorded broadcast put together by our senior producer, award-winning producer, Tim Mott, and we are so excited that we have him the entire hour. So we're going to ask the questions on your behalf, and Adam and I will be right back. Stay with us.
Have you ever heard someone say, I don't like the idea of dogma, I don't like how the church claims to have authority? And yet, why does anyone believe anything unless they trust some authority? G.K. Chesterton says the modern world will accept no dogmas upon any authority, but it will accept any dogmas on no authority. Say that a thing is so according to the Pope or the Bible, and it will be dismissed as a superstition without examination. But preface your remark merely with, they say, or don't you know that, or try and fail to remember the name of some professor mentioned in some newspaper, and the keen rationalism of the modern mind will accept every word you say.
Spend more time with the Apostle of Common Sense. Visit chesterton.org for more information.
Stand Tall is now offering advanced group coaching sessions with master coaches highly trained in life skills. Visit standtalltoday.com and register for one of our upcoming group coaching events. These virtual opportunities are designed to take you to the next level of life in your relationships, career, faith walk, and so much more. Space is limited. Hurry to standtalltoday.com and sign up for one of our advanced group coaching sessions. standtalltoday.com.
The Spirit World continues with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Bly. We're not taking live phone calls today. Please email your questions to tsw@grnonline.com.
Okay, we are back with this pre-recorded Independence Day weekend broadcast of the Spirit World, where we have a very special guest. George Weigel is with us about his new book, Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice. And actually, forgive me, sir, I should say Dr. Weigel. How come you never sign your books, Dr. Weigel? I always see George Weigel on all your book covers.
Well, that's because I am happily undoctorated, although I have 19 honorary doctorates.
You're so brilliant, though.
I just got going with life after my master's degree, and
Good deal. Good deal.
so
Well-
no, George is just fine.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Well, Adam's got more questions for you, but this is a fascinating discussion about just what's really happening on our college campuses, our universities, and especially we're going to get into what happens when you want to send your young adult to a college university. So that's going to be very interesting. Go ahead, Adam. You keep going.
Well, George, if it's okay if I just use George,
Yeah.
like you said. Okay. You're making me reflect. Back in graduate school, I taught, it was some like philosophy of science or something. It was an undergrad course. And honestly, it was the first time I was introduced to the idea of the postmodern kind of philosophical movement. And it was such kind of a non-entity. And I had a student ask, as I was delivering the lecture on this, and somebody asked something about what was going to be on the test, and they kind of said, well, if it's postmodern, shouldn't I be able to answer any way that I like and get it right? And that moment has stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because it does point to like a little bit of truth in the sense that if you really take it seriously, the objective measure goes away. And I've been reflecting on this idea of the difference between living by God's yardstick and making up our own relativistic yardstick, like moral relativism and even this postmodern approach to the universe. And I keep kind of coming back to, if I was going to have heart surgery, would I want a postmodern surgeon?
Nope.
Or would I want somebody grounded in facts, right? Like if my life depended on it, I would absolutely, and I think most people would say, I want somebody who went to med school and did well and sticks to the facts, not how they're feeling today, about surgical philosophy. And I'm wondering, like, what's your sense of when this crept in?
Oh, it's been creeping in for several hundred years, Adam, I think. Let's take one particularly salient aspect of the problem. John Paul II wrote the encyclical Veritatis Splendor in 1993 to try to kickstart a reform of Catholic moral theology. And one of the issues he addressed in there is the question, are there what are known technically as intrinsically evil acts? Some things that are just wrong, period, irrespective of intention, circumstances, or whatever. Now, most normal human beings say, well, of course there are. Murder is intrinsically evil. Rape is intrinsically evil. Torturing children, that's off the board for good. And yet there are moral theologians today who continue to insist that either we cannot say definitively that there are intrinsically evil acts, or if we could, we can't know that any one instance of this is intrinsically evil. Now, this is complete nonsense, but it is a very considerable thread in the tapestry of Catholic moral theology today, and it's made something of a comeback over the last decade or so. This is deeply wrong. As John Paul II pointed out in Veritatis Splendor, to say that there are no such things as actions that are evil in themselves is to empty the moral life of its drama. I mean, there's no drama anymore. There's no struggle. There's no prayer for the help of grace and living a noble life. In fact, we can't even define what a life worth living is, excuse me, under those circumstances. Where does this start? History of philosophy, you can go back to Immanuel Kant, to David Hume, the notion that you cannot derive an ought from an is. This has paralyzed a lot of philosophical ethics. I always recommend to people who are willing to work through a serious book, the masterwork of the Belgian Dominican Servé Pinckaers called The Sources of Christian Ethics. It's one of the finest books I've read in the last 30 years. It's a definitive answer to this dumbing down of the moral life. And Father Pinckaers, I think, had quite an influence on the framing of Veritatis Splendor. Mm. Now, as Catholics, one of the things we have to do better is to explain that the Beatitudes are the Magna Carta of the Christian moral life. The Beatitudes express a life lived nobly. The Ten Commandments and the moral laws we can know by reason are guardrails that enable us to travel towards that beatitude that's described in the 8 Beatitudes. But the Catholic Church begins its reflection on the moral life with yes, not with no. And every time we say no to something, it's because of a higher and more compelling yes. And we need to do a better job of explaining that to the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what your experience was, but I found that even when I went through undergraduate, I realized later, there really was not a teaching how to think. There wasn't a formation of how to think systematically about things. The scientific method maybe was treated in a very cursory way. And in graduate school, one of the main goals was independent thought that made sense to your peers and was built from arguments that were defensible and could interact with other people in discussion and criticism. And it was a much more kind of powerful educational experience for me.
Yeah.
Do you think that, and I was in somewhat of a harder science, I was in a harder science end of psychology and adult clinical psych and doing brainwave research, so it was a little bit more objective in terms of the data we worked with. Is this problem creeping into graduate school now also?
Well, I'm the odd man out in a family of doctors. My maternal grandfather was a doctor. My mother was a medical technologist. My brother's a doctor. My older daughter's a doctor. Everybody's a doctor except me. And that both my brother and my daughter will tell you they are very concerned about the state of medical education right now because of the woke problem. Now, my daughter, Gwyneth, after going to the University of Dallas, which is a very demanding Catholic liberal arts college, went to Johns Hopkins Medical School. Hopkins imagines itself to be the center of medical education for the galaxy, not the planet, not the solar system, but the galaxy. These guys are not short on self-confidence here. And my daughter said to me a couple of years ago, I could not get into Hopkins these days. Or if I did, I wouldn't survive the first year because the woke business has simply taken over.
Really?
And particularly in reference to the transgender business. Well, now, this is completely bizarre, and it's an example of not following the science. Because my dear friend, Dr. Paul McHugh, possibly the most distinguished psychiatrist in the United States, had killed so-called sex reassignment surgery at Hopkins for 25 years by showing that it had no longitudinal benefit over time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're now finding this out again, but again, the ideology of willfulness, I choose this. I choose this. This is my freedom exercising itself. To say that I'm Georgina and I want you to fix me so that I can be that, has triumphed over, what you say, the hard science, because the data is all on the side of the notion that, gender dysphoria is a real problem. It is not fixed chemically or surgically. It can be fixed therapeutically or can be addressed therapeutically. But yet, a couple of weeks ago, when the Supreme Court upheld a Tennessee law that banned this kind of, I will use the term child abuse on minors, the American Pediatric Association said this is terrible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the corruption of science by woke ideology is a big problem in medical education today. And that was the case 20-some, it was beginning to be the case 20 years ago at Hopkins when my daughter was a student there. But fortunately, because she had been trained at Dallas and knew how to make an argument, she could hold her own. Mm-hmm. And in fact, by starting a Medical Students for Life chapter on the Hopkins campus, which was painting a very large target on her back, she actually got a lot of kids coming out of the closet, so to speak, as pro-lifers. Now, wow. when she came home one night and said to my wife and me, I think I should start a Medical Students for Life club mm-hmm. at Hopkins, I said, that's great, but you need air cover. So I called Paul McHugh, and he said, that's great. I'll get Ben Carson. Mm-hmm. So between Paul McHugh and Ben Carson, the air cover was in place. But it wouldn't be there today. Paul's retired, right. Ben's out.
Wow. You must be very proud of your daughter, your whole family, George. You guys did great. That's awesome.
Well, my wife has a great amount of credit for that. But
beautiful.
My daughter will very carefully tell you exactly how you're wrong, but in a very sweet way.
Good deal. Good deal. Okay, we're going to be back with our wonderful guest, George Weigel, when we come back from these important announcements here on The Spirit World. Remember, no phone calls today. This is our Independence Day weekend broadcast special for you, where we have very wonderful guests that have agreed to come on the entire hour and share some important information and formation for you today. So please keep taking those notes and absorb everything you can from George Weigel when we come back.
This is a Messy Family Minute with Mike and Alicia Hernan. We love the rosary, but when you have a group of rambunctious children, the thought of praying a family rosary can be kind of daunting.
Maybe it's because your ideal way of praying a family rosary doesn't match reality. Or maybe you've always found it just tough to pray the rosary. But it is a most powerful prayer. Our Lady gave it to us to encourage, protect, and sustain us.
You may feel like your family is bad at praying the rosary, but the good news is that there's lots of ways to use this powerful weapon of prayer. Prepare the environment. Get rid of phones, put away distracting toys, light candles, wait till everyone's calm, maybe even on the way to bed.
Or take it outside. If your kids are too energetic, do a walking rosary. And don't forget car trips when the kids are locked in your vehicle. And a rosary on the way to Mass is a great preparation. For more on this topic, listen to our podcast on family prayer at messyfamilyminute.org.
What's life coaching? Life coaching has been around for many years, helping people with their relationships, careers, health, and finances. With Stand Tall, it's all Christ-centered. We focus on mind, body, and spirit, taking life coaching to a whole new level. At standtalltoday.com, you can meet one of our experienced life coaches. Today is the day the Lord has made. So begin today with a new path for your life at standtalltoday.com.
The Spirit World continues with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Bly. We're not taking live phone calls today. Please email your questions to tsw@grnonline.com.
Our wonderful guest today, George Weigel, is with us for the entire hour, and it's moving rather quickly. But we have more questions we want to ask him about his newest book, Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice. It's by Ignatius Press, and you can pick it up on Amazon. I would suggest to get it today because anything that George Weigel produces is excellent. I will tell you that. And I noticed, George, that you were chair dancing just a little bit to our show theme music. Thank you, sir, for liking it. It is a very catchy little tune. And we like to think that the Gabriel Award we won that because of the content of the show, not the show music, but you never know. So
it was just the music.
It was the music. Yeah. We'll take the award any which way we can. But yeah, it was exciting to see you appreciate the music there, sir. But real quickly, we're going to switch gears a little bit because we have a lot of Catholic parents that are starting to look ahead on good education for their children and where they should place their children, how much money they should spend, things like that. But before we start to ask those questions of you, sir, let me ask you this. Would you go as far to say that we're slightly turning out diploma-carrying robots? I mean, if they're not thinking for themselves, if they're not growing and advancing, is it just you're paying to get a diploma and a degree and to move on, and you just have to do it because that's how the world has trained us to be?
I'm not sure I'd use the term robots, Debbie, because a robot is programmed to do something and usually does it reasonably well.
Right.
What too many institutions of higher learning are turning out today are young people with serious mental health problems. Here I venture onto Adam's territory here. Serious mental health problems, inability to form relationships, lack of any sort of a life plan, plus a sense of entitlement, which normally wouldn't go together. So I am all for people going to college, university to prepare themselves for a good career, a good family life, religious vocation. But to put the end before the means here, and particularly if that end is a monetary end, is a mistake. And I think there is going to be a movement in this country in the next 5 to 10 years. It's already begun in some places to reinvent trade schools, Catholic trade schools, where young people can go to learn to be an electrician, a plumber, car mechanic, do that in a Catholic context. You can make a perfectly reasonable living in any of those trades today. And the church needs to get back into that business, which it was in the 1920s and 1930s.
Interesting. Yeah, fascinating. Adam, and I know you're going to go in that same line of thinking there.
Yes. So I was hoping, George, if we could touch on two more things in our time together today. The first would be any thoughts that you have on, either for the parents or the students, about how to look at schools that they might be considering investing, $100,000 of debt into, and unless they have the means to just pay for it, a huge investment of time and money. Any thoughts about how they can discriminate between, a quality education and not? And the final thing I'm hoping, just looking ahead a little bit, is you touched on AI briefly. And I was listening to an interview with kind of the godfather of AI, a English professor, his name escapes me, who said, they were asking his advice. And he said, become a plumber, because all of the intellectual jobs are going to be gone. You know, as you mentioned earlier, the AI wrote a summary of a 900-page book in a minute, and it was as good or better than most people could produce. So I totally hear you and agree on the trades. You know, the physical things that, from my understanding of talking with business owners, is most young people do not want to do physical work and are unwilling to do it for any real length of time. So anyway, those are the two things, is AI and jobs, secondly, and first, how do we navigate this? How do we find a good school?
About 15 years ago, I was at a very impressive Catholic prep school in the Midwest to speak to their Parents Association about future of Catholic education. And one of the points I made was that your son, this was an all-boys school, does not have to go to any of the Ivy League schools or Duke or Stanford. You don't have to think that he has to go there or he's ruined for life. I said there are many, many fine Catholic liberal arts colleges and universities where the kid will get a better core curriculum. The mode of life on campus will be more agreeable. And the kid may actually come out with a sense of vocational responsibility as a missionary disciple. Well, I got endless pushback on this from the parents. No, unless the kid goes to Harvard or Yale or Brown or Columbia or Duke or Stanford, they're ruined for life. I said, it's just not true. And I induced my two daughters. You know, one goes from Dallas to Hopkins, one goes from Dallas to New York University. It is now the education director at a major arts center in New York. It's just not true. Well, more pushback. The next morning, I'm having coffee with the Benedictine monks who run this place, the ones who weren't teaching. And they said, thank you very much. We've been trying to make this point for years. Do you have any suggestions about how we could try again? And I thought for a minute, and I said, yes, give the parents of every incoming senior a copy of Tom Wolfe's book, I Am Charlotte Simmons. It's not Tom's greatest novel. It's very raw in a couple of places. But it is a very accurate portrait of what campus life, decadent campus life, was like on elite campuses 10 or 15 years ago. And I said, more to the point, it'll support your catechetical work, because in this novel, the smartest young girl from a small rural environment goes to an elite school, and the moral corruption on page 700 is preceded by the intellectual corruption on page 300, when she is told in a philosophy class there's no such thing as the truth. And I said, that'll, help you guys in your catechetical work. Well, I don't know whether they did that, but I think that, I hope that really quite silly sense that unless you spend somewhere near $500,000 on the kid getting into the high, what we used to call in the 50s, the high price spread, that the kid is ruined for life. This is absolutely fallacious. Now, where to go? Let me begin by recommending the campuses that invited me to do their commencement addresses. There are a number of very, very fine Catholic liberal arts colleges and universities in this country that will prepare a young person for anything. I've mentioned Dallas. There's Benedictine College in Kansas, University of Mary in North Dakota, Christendom College up the road here in Northern Virginia, Belmont Abbey College in North Carolina, Thomas Aquinas College in California. They're everywhere, and you can count on the kid getting a serious education in a decent environment in these places, and then they're prepared for anything. So that the parents have to get the idea out of their heads that elite schools are the only entry point into success in America. Now, hopefully, the kind of craziness we have seen on these campuses in the past year and a half is making people think again about this. I mean, you have to hope that's one benefit of this truly vulgar and disgusting stuff that has been going on at Columbia and Harvard and elsewhere.
Okay, we have about a minute until our final break, and then hopefully we can touch a little bit more on the impact of AI on the other side of that. But do you have any final thoughts about graduate school versus undergraduate in terms of trying to find a good program?
I am, having said what I said about the problems of wokery in medical education, I do think graduate schools in the hard sciences are generally in pretty decent shape around the country. That's why people come to them from all over the world. Some of the professional schools, law schools, business schools, etc., do a very good job. I think navigating grad school is easier if you have had a first-class undergraduate education with a strong foundation in the liberal arts. I am absolutely convinced that the liberal arts prepare you for anything. And getting that kind of foundation under your belt really helps.
Great information that is being imparted today on the Spirit World for this pre-recorded broadcast. We hope you're getting a lot out of it with our special guest, George Weigel. His newest book, Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice, is available right now at Amazon. It's by Ignatius Press. Please pick it up if you want to learn more about the college universities and campuses and what's happening and how you can make sure you pick the best university for your child. When we come back, the final segment of the Spirit World, no calls today, so please just stay tuned in and we will finish with our wonderful guest when we come back.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders from EWTN's Called to Communion. I want to let you know that I've joined the staff at Stand Tall Life Coaching. If you're struggling to put the Catholic faith into practice because of habitual sin, family or relationship problems, or other personal or theological issues, I'm offering help. Reach out to me at my website, drdavidanders.com, or at standtalltoday.com.
Among the many arguments relativists give to prove their worldview, one is that moral beliefs change. For example, they might say, we used to believe slavery was okay, but now we don't. If there were moral absolutes, well then moral beliefs wouldn't change. How do we respond? Well, we can ask the relativists if we've morally progressed in changing our country's slavery laws. Assuming they say yes, we can point out the fact that progress implies an objective moral standard that our society better conforms to today than it did 150 plus years ago. But if there's an objective moral standard that we've progressed toward, well then morality is not relative. So the relativist either has to give up on the idea that we've progressed morally in order to keep relativism, or reject relativism to keep the idea of moral progress. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
The Spirit World continues with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Bly. We're not taking live phone calls today. Please email your questions to tsw@grnonline.com.
This is our final segment with George Weigel. And Adam, I'll let you ask another question, but then please let me ask him this question about Pope St. John Paul II. I have been waiting and waiting to ask him this. So you go ahead first, Adam. We have about 9 minutes left, and then this very fast hour in Catholic radio is finishing for this weekend.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel like grumpy old men sitting around complaining about how things used to be. But I was about 13 years old when the internet came into being, and it started as bulletin boards. It was very primitive, and so I got to see it progress. And when I was a young kid, we still went outside. We rode bikes. We went out in the woods. We, did things and saw people and interacted with people. And then the texting came in, and it seems to me that it's been a great blow to our civilization in the sense that human beings are hardwired for community by our very nature that God has given us. We work in cooperation with each other. We help each other at different times, and vice versa. We provide correction, direction, all of these things. A lot of the social interaction has been blunted for a lot of people, or perhaps just become so uncomfortable, we're now facilitating the avoidance of it, right? So now tech support isn't with the phone, it's over text, because phone is too anxiety provoking, I think, for some people. It just seems to me, and also having worked, in psychological services a little bit, and seeing different generations and how they function, I don't think we've come to terms with the impact of that yet. And it seems to me that the next wave that's coming with AI is a time when not only is it no longer necessary to interact with people and learn how to interact with people and learn how to deal with my reactions to other people, and basically all those human kind of skills, I think it's fair to say skills. We haven't even come to terms with that, and now we're going to come to a time when I no longer need to learn anything intellectual. Mm-hmm. I don't have to actually learn about grammar, because it's going to fix my grammar on the fly as I'm typing. I certainly don't have to learn, calculations or basic mathematics. That kind of went out the window with calculators coming in. It just seems to me that we're going to, if we relinquish another layer of functioning to the machine and the facilitation,
Mm-hmm.
Putting
Mm-hmm.
these barriers between us, there's going to be very little left for us to do.
We become like machines.
And
Yeah.
it's going to be a real disservice to kids. And here's my thought, George. What's your thought? One of the things that I think parents could really do is force children as they're coming up, at least up through high school, to actually do the work themselves. Find a way to really make that a reality for them, because I think the temptation is too great to let AI do it on their own.
I certainly agree with that, Adam. I would be perhaps even more draconian. I would say no smartphones till at least 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
Maybe 18. But I know from my daughter's pediatric practice how much harm is done by chat groups and Facebook and whatnot, particularly with adolescent girls.
Yeah.
And this is why we have these mental health problems. So, if you need a phone that's for emergency purposes but doesn't have internet access, that's fine. But I would absolutely limit any contact with social media until at least kids 16 years old. Let me go back to just, this is going to sound like I'm on hire from the University of Dallas, but Dallas has a 4-semester core curriculum course that everyone takes called Literary Traditions 1, 2, 3, and 4. In your first semester at that school, and this is everybody, this is not just the English majors or the philosophy majors or whatever. In the first semester, you read the entire Iliad, the entire Odyssey, and the entire Aeneid. In the second semester, you read the entire Divine Comedy, Milton's Paradise Lost, and a modern poet. And there's 4 semesters of this. So by the time you're through that, you begin to understand that you are the heir of a civilization. So I think that kind of thing. I wish Catholic high schools would get back into teaching Catholic classics. My daughters went to a pretty good local Catholic girls' high school, but in their literature courses, they never read a novel by Evelyn Waugh or Graham Greene or Flannery O'Connor or Robert Hugh Benson or G.K. Chesterton, but they were assigned the color purple. And I kept saying to these teachers, we're at the end of one of the great centuries of Catholic literature in the Anglosphere, and these kids aren't reading any of it. Right. You're cheating them here. So, that can start at the high school level and move on into undergraduate education as well. I have no answer to the AI thing. I mean, I just don't know enough about it to even suggest anything.
And
but
George,
I think we're going to have to insist as Catholics that life is more than algorithms.
Right.
That algorithms cannot produce virtue. Algorithms cannot, I don't think, produce prudential judgment. I think this is what, I knew Henry Kissinger slightly, and I think this is what Henry was really worried about with AI, is that it would take over foreign policy and military decision-making, which would be done by algorithms rather than by prudential judgment. And that is a very, very dangerous situation.
It's so interesting, and that's really what I was trying to mention and refer to when I was talking about a robotic nature. It was interesting to me because how many kids do not know how to write in cursive, right? And yet. Yeah, and they'll run to the phone and get a signature from the phone, that's it. And it's like, well, that's not your signature. They don't even know how to sign their name. I mean, it's very interesting how we've developed this. But, and that's what concerns me too, that creativity's lost.
Yeah, well, Adam could probably comment on this. You're the guy on brain stuff and whatnot, physiology. I have always said paper was invented for a reason. There is something about our brains that responds to a printed page in the way that it does not respond to a screen. Is that accurate scientifically? I mean, can that be demonstrated? Well, certainly demonstrated in my life. I mean, books that I read, I remember stuff from. Books that I read on Kindle, I've forgotten, 6 months later.
Yeah, I mean, we don't probably have time to get into it all, but the more modalities by which you interact with the material, including the tactile, is going to increase your retention of that material. So if you think about it, if you write it, if you say it, if you read it, you are more likely to retain versus just one of those modalities, and it applies to all the senses. So interacting with it physically. Yep.
Wow. Okay, so we only have
get your question in.
Yeah, we only have about 10 seconds. So do you think that Pope St. John Paul II will become a doctor of the church?
Oh, I'd wait on that for a while. I mean, usually it takes hundreds of years for someone to be declared a doctor of the church.
Okay.
And I think that's wise. I mean, he certainly was a brilliant man. His magisterium is incredibly important. Let's see how it plays out in the texture of Catholic life for the next while.
Okay. Well, we'll have to see it on the other side of the veil then. But thank you so much, George Weigel. You are incredible. Keep writing all these wonderful books for us and turning them out for us because you are amazing. We need you there for us. So thank you, sir. Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice. You can pick it up on Amazon. It's by Ignatius Press, and this has just been an amazing hour. Please share it with your friends. That we feel that's a good use of social media, okay? And yes, we will be taking your calls next weekend, so don't worry. For Adam Bly, I'm Debbie Georgianni. Until next Saturday, have a beautiful and blessed week. We'll see you real soon.